I'd like to call to order the December. I'd like to call to order the December 21st meeting of the Swarthmore Borough Council. Notable for any number of reasons, including the fact that it's Elizabeth and my last session, but more on that later. It's good to see everyone is here except Michael, who's excused. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any members of the public have any words of wisdom, advice, or comment on any matter that they wish to share with Borough Council? Mr. Lee.
Good evening, Council. Rick Lee, Vice President of the Fire Company. The Swarthmore and Morton and Rutledge Fire Companies would like to thank the residents of Swarthmore and the surrounding communities for their support of our tree sales, which ended yesterday. Things went very well again this year. We certainly had the weather every weekend, and so we do thank the communities for their support. The Fire Company also wants to thank Council for their support in the passage of the budget for 2016. Your support in these changing times is very much appreciated. And last, a thank you to Ralph Jacobs, who has been a valued supporter of the Fire Company in the last 4 years he's been here, and we wish you luck in 2016.
Well, thank you very much. Any other public comment? Scott.
Yes, Scott Richardson, 304 Rutgers Avenue, and also owner of Vacation Yours, 10 Park Avenue. Let me start off by saying thank you very much for a great year this year. I know you probably get people up here complaining more than you do thanking, so let's start off with a thank you. Now I'm going to be complaining. Just an observation. We've gone through, I've been meaning to come over, but I thought I'd give this new parking situation, several months to kind of like get a handle on exactly what's going on. As a business owner that has employees, we're really having quite an issue. I have one employee that I think might be leaving us because one, the amount of money she has to pay to park every day, and two, the amount of tickets she gets because when we're busy, she can't leave to go feed the meter. And what's happening is that many of the businesses, and I'll leave the names unsaid at this time, have also had the same issue, and what they're doing now is they're parking in front of their stores where they can feed the meter. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose of having parking for customers. And it's not that the business district is thriving at its highest point since the 26 years I've been here, but when I see 4 to 5 business owner cars parked in front of our stores, and when I ask about it, they're like, I've received all these tickets. My wife's probably gotten 20, 25 tickets because we can't, leave when the meter runs out. So I have been walking around for about the last 2 weeks, and at least to me, for the council, if they could help us out, would be to come up with some form of permit for employees of the borough that would be, something fairly reasonable. I mean, I estimate that my young lady that I have probably spends between $40 and $60 a month in meters. And these are people making $10, $12 an hour. That's a big chunk of change. And she goes, I can go someplace and work and not have to pay that. And she's one of them is a really good employee. So, that's an issue. But if you could come up with maybe some form of a meter or a parking sticker that employees could use, and I know that they're available now, but they're available for the 8-hour meters. And a lot of the businesses don't open up until 10 o'clock in the morning, and by the time you come in at 10 o'clock, basically the 8-hour meters are used up by the commuters. And as this bridge is being, the trestle's going into repair here in a little bit, I only see the situation getting worse with less parking available. So in the few weeks that I've been walking around, the 4-hour meters down Myers Avenue, the ones over here on Park Avenue, and I'm not sure because I didn't walk over by the post office, if any of those are 4-hour. Pretty much about 70–80% of them are empty during the day because they're not long enough for a commuter to put in. And I would like to see a sticker that we could afford to have that would be good and afford to 8-hour meter, to try to get them away from the 2-hour meters. So if there's anything you can do to help, it would be much, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Ross?
Good evening. My name is Ross Schmucke. I've been a resident of Swarthmore for 29 years, and I live at 218 Rutgers Avenue. And I am going to be joining the Borough Council, and for that reason I've been attending the meetings regularly for the last few months. And I simply want to thank all the council members on behalf of us who have been benefiting from your services for so many years, but not always seeing everything you do, and the mayor and Jane Billings and the solicitor also, because it's really a tremendous service. And then I wanted to particularly thank you, Ralph Jacobs, and Elizabeth Nat for your service. I've seen how hard you work. It's unpaid service, and I think it's a great service to the community. So before I come on, I just wanted to thank you very much as a citizen.
You're very welcome. Any other public comment? Anyone else have anything else to share with Borough Council? Hearing none, I'll declare public comment closed. Next on the agenda is remarks by the President of Borough Council. Ordinarily, I don't have much to say other than to run through some agenda items, but I'm going to ask that you indulge me for a few minutes of remarks, reminiscences, and observations about my time on Borough Council. I know that when people hear that I'm on Borough Council, they ask, is it a lot of work? What's the most surprising thing about it? They have a lot of questions, and to me, one of the things that was most surprising is just the range and depth of issues that we deal with. I was talking to David Grove before we started about this, but who knew that you would learn so much about stormwater and sewers and municipal finance and negotiate a labor contract? You'll learn about zoning and the environment and PennDOT regulations. Who here doesn't know so much more about PennDOT regulations than before they assumed this position? So that's really one striking thing that I observed. We do get a lot of help in our work. We get a lot of help, and we all know who helps us an awful lot, but we'll come to her later. But we get help from Elise and Nancy, and before them from Amanda and Carol and Diane. We get help from the small but dedicated core of borough employees, Cuzzy and the Public Works Department. We know how hard they work, and sometimes the public doesn't really appreciate. They may see snow cleared, but not appreciate everything that goes into it. We have an extraordinary police department here. It's been a real personal pleasure for me working with you, Chief, and meeting monthly with you and the sergeants, and really coming to understand not just what a well-prepared, well-trained professional law enforcement operation we have, but how lucky we are to have our own police department with an approach to community policing that maybe most residents of Swarthmore don't appreciate, but I will tell you, we have a very valuable resource in a police department that not only is prepared for the full range of law enforcement activities, but really goes out of its way to help residents of Swarthmore deal with whatever they're dealing with. It's a great resource, and it's been a pleasure to work with you. We have a volunteer fire company, and more on the idea of volunteers generally, but Rick, who spoke earlier, really has played an instrumental role in improving communications between the fire company and council, I think, for the benefit of both. And I owe a personal thank you to Rick. It's been a pleasure working with our council. Bob, it's been interesting as someone with legal training to be a client instead of a lawyer, but you've done a great job in keeping us out of trouble. We're trying to, which I think is the role of council, guiding us through this arcane thicket of municipal law. We get help from all quarters. We've gotten help from the task forces that that Borough Council has appointed the Bicycle and Pedestrian Task Force, a member of which is now on Borough Council, and some recommendations of which are still in the process of being implemented. We have an Aging in Place Task Force that we heard from just last meeting that has come up with some very interesting and some measures challenging recommendations, but that could really help make Swarthmore continue to be the welcoming kind of place it is to all sorts of people. And last but not least, as they say, Jane is someone who we all know as knowledgeable and professional. Some people, Jane, have called you indispensable. But thinking about, it's been a pleasure working with you, but thinking about it, I think that you've really found your calling in this job, because I see how you enjoy it and take pride and pleasure in doing it so well. So I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you. And one more person sitting around this table who it's been a pleasure to work with is our mayor. Tim and I, you may or may not know, we used to coach soccer together many years ago. Tim was the accomplished soccer player who really knew the game. And Tim sometimes described my role as that of encourager, which in the context of U10 girls soccer, it probably was. Tim, I think, among his many roles as mayor, is our encourager, and I mean that in the best sense. It's not just leadership, but it's identifying issues. It's not just being the public face of the borough, but encouraging Borough Council, for example, on the Aging in Place Task Force, or on volunteerism, or to see how we can be more green a community. And it's the role of mayor in this particular government configuration is an interesting one. But Tim, it's great to see you do such a great job as mayor and encourager. Not that we don't have our challenges, and this is not my valedictory telling you what to do. I'm out of here shortly, but we've got some challenges, including limited amount of open space. We've got challenges with fire protection and ambulance service, and we've all talked about the substance of it. We've got challenges with budget is always a challenge in a small town like this. One issue that's not a challenge, I would say, is town-gown relationships. I think when some people ask, what's it like to be in borough government in a college town, I would say that in the time that I've been on Borough Council, which I guess spans parts of the administrations of 3 college presidents, the trend has just been uniformly in the right direction towards increasing engagement and cooperation between the borough and the college. I think we all know what a great resource the college is. They invite the community in to lectures and performances and to use their resources. And I think the borough is pleased that we're having an increasing opportunity to welcome students who we see, I think, more frequently in town, whether at Hobbs or the co-op. And I think that this increasing engagement is just great for both institutions. And I appreciate the work that the college has done in that direction. But we talk about aging in place and open space and things like that, and someone will say, look, it's it's not like the really challenging stuff that our government in Washington D.C. is gridlocked with, and it's not even as tough as what makes our dysfunctional Harrisburg government grind to a halt. Some people have even described what we do as amateur government. But I would say not. I would say it's not for the faint of heart or the dilettante. You've heard the expression that all politics is local, and it's true when you're trying to, for example, allocate a few hundred parking spaces to more competing users with different priorities and time schedules than there are parking spaces. That's a challenge. Or as Elizabeth and I had the experience, and I don't think anyone else here, when the market crashed in 2008, putting a huge hole in our budget as a result of mandatory pension contributions, we struggle with the issue of, do we cut the library a little bit, even though everybody thinks it's an extraordinary resource? Do we give a little bit less to SRA, which does such wonderful stuff for our kids? Do we raise taxes in an environment when a lot of families are struggling? These issues they're challenging issues for anyone, but when they're the issues that people feel strongly about, should you build an inn here, should you have a rotary in the middle of town, and these are the people who you see in line at the co-op or sit next to on the train. This is not for amateurs. This is really citizen government. And it's representative government. I would say that it's representative government, not just because all of us were elected to represent Swarthmore, but because we reflect the town. As I don't know how many of you are dog owners, but sometimes people say, our dogs begin to look like us, or we begin to look like our dogs. I don't know if that's true, but I think in the same fashion, a borough council can reflect or represent its town. And I think that, I mean that in the best sense, because one of the pleasures of working with this borough council is, I can honestly say, I have never seen a member of borough council come into a meeting, committee meeting, this meeting, with any personal agenda other than to do what's best for Swarthmore. You listen carefully and respectfully to each other. You speak thoughtfully. Not every resident of Swarthmore may agree with our decisions. I mean, frankly, if we only decided things that had unanimous acclaim out there, they wouldn't really need us. But even though people may not unanimously agree with our decisions, I think we can say we reach them the right way after careful consideration in the best interest of the town. And that is really what citizen government is all about in the very best sense. And it's been a pleasure for me to be a part of it. It has really been a privilege to be part of it, and for that I thank all of you.
Thank you, Ralph. Well said.
Thank you.
Moving right along. Consideration of the minutes. You've all had by email minutes of our last two meetings, November 9 and December 7. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
There's a motion moved and seconded. Any corrections, comments, discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Minutes are approved. Next, the 2016 council meeting schedule. You've had it last month, and I think again by email this month. Is there a motion to approve the meeting schedule?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion, comments? All in favor of approving the council meeting schedule, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting schedule is approved. Next, the holiday schedule. We're really on a calendar roll here. Is there a motion to approve the 2016 holiday schedule?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the holiday schedule, please say aye.
Aye.
Next, we have two resolutions. Both of them, I believe, were emailed. First is the schedule of fees, charges, and fines for 2016. And I think in some cases these are maximum fines. Is that right? But we have to have a resolution in place in order to have the flexibility to impose them. All right. Is there a motion to approve the fee, charge, and fine schedule for next year?
I move to.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I just wanted, Jane, is there any major, we talked about a little bit among fees, but I don't think we've made
No,
any
the only
major
change in fees was highlighted on the first version I sent out, which was the stormwater management plans, because it's really a pass-through cost. The engineer has to review them. So For residential, it went from 250 to 500. For commercial, it went from 500 to 1,000. Or for, it's not really for a full plan. The college actually ends up paying for theirs as part of their land development process. But that was the only change from this.
That's all I have.
All right, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of approving the fee and fine schedule for 2016, please say aye.
Aye.
The schedule is approved. Next, resolution approving 2016 salary and benefits, which contains various policies on vacation, healthcare benefits, so forth, and has an attached Appendix A with the schedule of compensation for borough employees. You have all received it by email.
Yes.
I move its adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor of approving the salaries and benefits, please say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. Next, the supplemental agreement for the pedestrian and bicycle accessibility project. Jane, this is the Baker invoice.
Correct.
And I think, by way of background, I understand that they've requested approximately $3,000, slightly less than $3,000 as a supplement to their $72,000
Correct.
contract.
For the specific items that are mentioned in their letter, that's right.
Can I have a motion to approve this, and then we'll open it up for discussion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions, comments, discussion?
I'll say it just for the sake of saying to everyone at council, because we talked a little bit about it with a few of us. I don't necessarily love the process. I understand add-ons happen. But in any business, they should tell us there's going to be add-ons prior to their actions. So I guess if we could work a little bit better on it.
Absolutely.
If it's outside the scope of the bid, that's fine. And certainly the things they did were things that came out of meetings that in all likelihood we would have wanted them to do. But we didn't know we were getting billed until we get the bill, which is always an uncomfortable thing. Was it?
I know a lot of contracts have like a written change order provision that says work has to be approved in advance if possible. I don't know if this one did, but I guess it would help if we had that as a matter of course.
Future contracts. And there, it might very well be in the contract they have.
It's usually not in our professional contracts, it's usually more in our, with a, more of a bricks and mortar, but.
That's the,
Yeah.
the work they did was what we wanted done.
Okay.
For sure.
Following up on that point, even if there's no formal change order procedure, I think it would be well, if we can, with, when we're getting professional services of this kind, to have them understand at the beginning that if in fact it appears that we're asking them to do things that were not within their contemplation when they made the proposal they did, it'd be nice if they told us so that we're not surprised.
Okay, so those points are well taken. I don't hear any opposition to the actual payment for the work that they did in this case. All in favor of approving the supplemental contract, please say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. All right, on to committee reports. Environment, Lauren.
Not too much, but we did have the energy audit of the building, and has that been, we're waiting to hear what it is, but it was interesting to go around with them, and I don't think anything looked really unusual from what they said. That was a free energy audit, and that's really all I have for today.
All right, thank you. Next, finances. There's another member of the finance committee who's going to report.
I think he thought I was going to do it. That would be my guess.
Carry on.
Because I think he said, Jane, are you okay presenting with the budget or something?
That would have been a tough
But I can't make a motion, so I will chat about things. The first thing is the financial report. through the month of November. Remember, there's no bills in here because the bills were paid a couple of weeks ago, so we didn't end up in delinquency on our various utility bills and whatnot. You can see from the cover sheet, like last year, where our revenues are a little over already, and we'll have a little bit more revenue coming in the month of December. Not a lot. And expenditures are tracking about the same as last year as well. In terms of the cash balance, if you look at the budget, we've been saying all along that we expected our cash balance at the end of the year to be around $425,000. Mostly because that paving project came in about $50,000 less than anticipated, and everything else is held about where we thought. I think that number is going to be closer to $500,000. Now remember, we're drawing down again next year. We balance the budget a little bit with some of those reserves. So we're still at the upper end of our range, which is the 10% of prior year expenditures. We like to be between 5 and 10%. And if all goes well next year, we'll be around 8%. So, any questions on the financials? Okay, so somebody should make a motion. To approve. You can, and it's the two things. You can do the financial report, and we can do an omnibus and the checks and wire. I see all that.
Well, we didn't do checks and wires.
We didn't do wires. The wire transfers are on.
We didn't do wire
We
transfers.
didn't do checks. And we're ratifying also one check on that list. There's a wire transfer into the post-retirement healthcare account. I will just remind people as you read about the dire straits that communities will be in because they're underfunding their pensions and they are underfunding their post-retirement medical. We are hoping that we will not be in that situation because we've been funding our post-retirement healthcare for at least 10 years.
Okay, I move that we approve the checks and wire transfers, or ratify, rather,
Financial report and wire.
and the financial report for November 2015.
Second.
Any discussion, comments, any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the financial report, checks and wire transfers, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved.
The budget really has no difference from what you saw in the November proposed budget. So I don't remember any outstanding questions in there. There is a slight increase in millage. I think it's around 2%. There are some increases in fees. We have increase in our sanitary sewer costs, increase in our, we rebid the trash contract and recycling. Those costs went up a bit. Nothing that hasn't been discussed before. And I think we've covered what most of the expenditure increases are as well. I will point out that last sheet that's in there is all of our capital accounts. And that's the one where you'll see the very last capital account that's listed is actually the beginning fund balance of $500,000. The report you got last time, that was, I think, $425,000.
All right, is there a motion on it?
No,
Okay.
I'm just
Can
talking.
I have a motion to approve the 2016 final budget?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions, comments?
I guess we should just comment a little bit on our millage increase of 2% is a tax increase. And we haven't had a tax increase in
2 years.
2 years. And it's driven primarily, I would say, by our, there were some small budget increases, but I think it's the pension, as much as anything, would drive our keeping that between 8 to 10% range that Mike talks about.
I think personnel costs will range some of that. The contracted employees are over 3.5% this year. It's pretty hard to fund that without a tax increase. I think quite a few of our community groups, including the library and
And the fire department, for sure.
They had not had increases. The library certainly sometimes, so that was fueling some of it. So those are the major ones.
Thank you. It's always good to talk about. We're going to talk about taxes, talk about where you spend it.
And we also achieved an increase at that level by, in fact, using some of our fund balance, which had crept to an amount beyond the range that we had in mind when we established it, such that part of that excess could be used to minimize the extent of the tax increase.
That's a good one.
And just a question about the fund balance. I think this is an accounting artifact displaying my ignorance of accounting, but the cash balance shown on the financial report is up well over 780,000, but that's different than the fund
Right, well, it's
balance.
not, right, so that's at the end of the month of November, but in December, you're spending fair amounts of money on personnel with very little money coming in. So you'll see that hovering around 500,000. Our bank balance, I start to check it pretty religiously at this time of year. I think it was about 570,000, but there's one more payroll and a few checks going out, so.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor of approving the 2016 budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved.
And you can probably just run through the next ones. The tax ordinance, we talked about all of these last time. And again, this just clearly sets out the millage and fees.
All right, do I have
I move we approve the 2016 tax and fee ordinance as previously circulated and discussed at our last meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved.
I move the following resolutions authorizing the borough treasurer to collect the sanitary sewer fee, non-uniform with police contributions to pension funds, cost of living adjustments for borough pensioner, and appointment of the independent auditor.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
These were all discussed last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the resolutions, please say aye.
Aye.
They're approved. And that should cover finance. Next, general government. Dave.
Thanks, Ralph. We did not meet this month. I do have a resolution. We discussed it, and I know this resolution is mine to make, so it's more comfortable in Mike's absence. We had talked about establishing procedures for violations in the town, and this is going to change some of them. So I move we adopt the ordinance as you received it. There's been no changes since we circulated it 2 weeks ago.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
That's all I have, Ralph.
All right, thank you. Planning and zoning, Elizabeth.
Okay. So, first off, in my 8 years as chair of planning and zoning, I don't think we've ever had 2 land developments resolutions to do. Plus an ordinance. Anyway, so, but moving right along.
You're leaving your successor, whoever she may be, with a clean plate.
Not quite. One of them is only a preliminary land development. That's going to continue into. Moving right along there, I guess in order of what's on the agenda, we've had in front of us the revised institutional zoning ordinance, revising it into from the single one to the INA and INB, A being the big parcel that is Swarthmore College's large parcel, and INB being the number of smaller institutional parcels around town that are some owned by the school district, some owned by Swarthmore College, and one of them owned by Cades. So we've been, I think I've been asking for any questions for the last several months. We've been tweaking that. We've had very good, we obviously notified all 3 of the institutional entities that it affects, Swarthmore College, the school district, and Cades. The college had some very good comments that they provided us, and we had some very good informal discussions with them. I think it's a pretty thoroughly looked at ordinance at this point. Delaware County Planning also reviewed it. They've reviewed it twice now because we had a small tweak to it after their first review, and they said, you know, this really falls very closely with the intent of the multi-municipal comprehensive plan from a number of years ago. So, that said, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 1072. Bob, do I have to read the whole thing?
No.
Okay, fine. That we adopt ordinance 1072.
Second.
That's fine.
Any discussion, questions, comments?
I would just like to thank Elizabeth. She was one of the people I spoke to before running for Borough Council. And the time and the thoroughness and the depth and breadth of what she's done, I think, with everything she's been associated with. But much like you're not into finance, I'm not planning and zoning by nature. But then I tried to vet it a little bit. I looked at other boroughs, and it was so comprehensive and so well thought out. And there can always be variances, passed for different things. I didn't have a lot of comments to add because I thought you covered. It was actually well thought out by both you and so that was the only thing I wanted to add. I know Elizabeth several times reached out for comments, but I didn't.
Well,
I couldn't
actually,
craft it better.
you did have a couple comments, and we covered that, and I thank you for those.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other
Okay.
questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving ordinance 1072, adopting the new zoning regulations, please say aye.
Aye.
It's adopted.
Elizabeth, did you get any comments back from the school district or
No.
Kate's?
No.
Just curious. Neither are probably planning any construction anytime.
Right.
That's that.
Or they're busier than the college. And obviously incorrect, since we now have two land development things on the agenda tonight from the college. So they have actually been keeping all of us and Planning Commission very busy for some time. So the first one is actually the Whittier Place space final land development plan. And we discussed that 2 weeks ago. So I would like to move to approve the resolution approving the Swarthmore College Whittier Space Final Land Development Plan.
Second.
Any discussion, any questions? You have the, that's not the-
Plans on this?
I think those plans were out last time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen the plans, we'll discuss them.
I do have a copy if anybody needs to look at something.
Hearing no questions or comments, all in favor of approving the Whittier Space Final Land Development Plan, please say aye.
Aye.
It's approved.
I would note, I think the most remarkable thing that the college has done in that area is to expose what I always thought of as Hansel and Gretel's house that was across from Whittier Place, that was overgrown with I don't know what, and I assume at some point in time somebody actually lived there. For all I know, died there. But nevertheless, it's a remarkable transformation of one parcel.
Yeah.
And it was sort of fun to watch it come to life.
I would note too that there was a complaint about the sidewalks on that side of the street. I guess they're called the north side of the street. And somebody said, couldn't you put in the resolution for them to fix the sidewalks? I said, well, that's something that should be done anyway, and I don't know if you heard that comment or whatever, but those sidewalks are, well, redone in the last 3 months, and they're great.
Well, once the property saw light of day, I'm sure lots of things were done about that.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually quite a bit more, I think almost the entire block was redone,
Right.
sidewalks,
It's amazing.
and there'll be a little bit more going in.
Okay, and then the last item is Swarthmore College has presented the preliminary land development plan for the new dorm project on the corner of Harvard and 320, known as the NPPR project. And that went in front of the Planning Commission last Wednesday. It had previously gone in front of the Planning Commission in October, and they had asked for an additional pedestrian and parking study to be done. And that was done in time for the December meeting, and I think everybody actually has been sent that parking, okay. So I know the college wants to present something about that project, so if you want to do that now.
Take this opportunity, first to thank you for all the work, but to show you what we have shown the Planning Commission, so you get to see what we talked about so much. Should put it right side up. That would be the thing.
What's your role at the college, Sue?
I'm Vice President for Facilities and Capital Projects. This is the plan to orient you. This is Harvard and Chester Road. These are the existing residence halls now. These two linked and Roberts Hall down here. These are planned behind those. In three pods I'll show you in a minute. This is how we use the land. Most of the conversation arose around pedestrian circulation on this site and how we would get trash and services, which is through this small driveway here. We've now taken what was a road in here out and just done pedestrian paths. This is a new plaza in front of these, so we can connect this as a quad, and a grass plot. And we have run, part of what we did was run a sidewalk out here to connect to this, and this sidewalk was redone as part of the roundabout project and was carried across the driveway to here, where it tapered back to a 4-foot sidewalk, and we said we will carry that wider sidewalk down to here. So this connection is to a wider sidewalk going up. Handicap parking down here. And we've talked to the fire department about all the access and stabilization. This, what you're seeing here, is stabilized areas for the fire trucks, although not paved, like as we've done on the rest of the campus. So we don't have a sea of paving on the site. It incorporates, we're going to have our own Division III Big League ballpark. This becomes the outfield wall, and there's a terrace above it that I can.
So it'd be like Fenway Park, students can sit on the roof and watch.
Well, they can sit, this is a terrace, they can be on the terrace and watch the game, and you have to hit the ball up onto the terrace to hit it out, so it can be played off the wall. And there are actually two, I can't remember the park surface or where, it actually has two bulletproof glass windows in the lower level, so you can stand inside and look from the view of the center fielder.
You put ivy on the wall? Ivy on the wall?
No ivy on the wall. Cushions on the wall. We're trying to decide whether we're doing photographic images on the cushions of something. Ivy, maybe. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And that terrace above, building space below actually means that this is one building.
Right.
As opposed
all
to,
connected.
people might quickly think it's 3 buildings, but it's.
Well, this is one, and they're connected at every
Right.
floor by bridges that are glass, transparent through. This is actually planted. So there's a large planting area that I think I could show you in a minute that's right in line with for the batter's eye to see the pitch ball, which you see on all the big league parks now. And then there were a couple changes that were suggested. This is stormwater management here. One time we ran it down here, but we found that the percolation wasn't great here. The percolation is terrific in here, so we're going to triple this to make it, to contain it all here. And there was a suggestion that's in it about what we tied into it. One time we were going to tie it to a 12-inch line, now we're going to bring it around and tie it into a 21-inch line. So I think we've satisfied those comments. So I think we agreed that we would do all the things asked, and then there were some suggestions that are in this proposal now we've also agreed.
Right.
Now, I can go back and give you some sense. So this is looking across the softball field. So this is really from the roundabout. This is picture here, Palmer here, and then the new building that sits back here. These, the two of the blocks are 4, this one's 5 stories. And the baseball field's back behind that. So this is showing the wall at the baseball field, solar panels on the roof. We're doing solar collection, we're putting geothermal wells in left field. So we're going to start this summer and put the wells in and restore the field before the season next year. So this will be done with geothermal. Some of this is photovoltaics and hot water that we'll do on the roof. And then there are these planting areas on the roof. As I said, this is right straight out across center field to that planted spot on the top.
Steve, could you mention the fact that it's suite style and the...
Thank you. So this is suite style. There are 129 beds in this building now. We will be taking 6 buildings off the back of Palmer. It had an addition put on it at one time to open up the space between the buildings. And then we think now there will also be a space for a junior level resident advisor person in here. So we'll get a net of 120 beds. But there's a little addition on the back of this building now that will come off here and open this space up and make this a nicer space and go back to the stone wall. This is a stucco addition on the back that's 2 stories high. So there are 20 suites. They go from 4 to the biggest, I think we did is actually 9 in a suite. Each student has their own sleeping space and work study space, and then a common space for the kitchen, and the bathrooms are sized to the number of students in the space.
So it's 120 new students?
There'll be net new students.
On
New
top,
beds.
On top of about 120?
On top of about 120 in here now. That's
Do you
fairly
maybe want to
consistent.
mention about the special exception that you received for the height of the building?
Thank you. We did receive a special exception for the height of this building.
It's over, 35 feet is the maximum. By special exception, you go to 55 feet, and that was heard by the zoning hearing board about a month ago.
November.
Yeah.
Then we agreed to that.
What's the height of the tallest of the legacy buildings that front
These?
just the road that looked at? I just wondered.
They are actually a little taller than this at
That's
the
what I was
ridge, at the
wondering.
ridge line.
Right,
At the
right.
ridge line, which, I mean, technically, we measure
And I understand.
height to halfway
These are
down,
not going to be,
yeah.
not going to be demonstrably taller. The
No, I
buildings
think
are already there.
this building is fairly high here, so they're kind of enclosed by what's
Yeah, I
there.
understand.
There is a gap here where you'll see through to them, which is why we care very much about these being glass so you can see light all the way through. You can see them.
Your terrace, Stuart, is just for students though, right? Is that all walled off all the way around?
Yes, there's no access. You'll have to have card access to get to
So
it.
is that access just for those privileged students in the suites, or can other students get in and out?
Other students will go out in and out. I think there's a space underneath, there's a wonderful space underneath of all this on the first level that's going to be used by the dean staff for lots of different things.
How far does the ball have to be hit to clear that wall?
You know,
I asked that.
and I have it, but I don't have it with me.
Take a mighty cloud.
Can I get back to you?
No.
Because they are moving
I
the
do.
wall in.
We actually did a series of studies. There was a study done for National League Baseball on right, and so they looked at the heights and distances for lots of different hits in the major leagues, and we have that. Big Saw actually did that whole study, and it's in the book we have. I could share that, but and we talked a lot with our baseball coach about what he wanted to see.
Can I ask you some parking questions?
Sure.
We got the report, we in council got the report today, and I just have a few questions. And, what class members, in terms of what members of what class will be eligible to be in this space?
All classes.
All classes. And how are parking permits for the 10%, understand that student bodies are entitled to, not more than 10% can have permits to park permissibly, not to account for all those that don't have permits that park at 10.
I think that problem's a little less now.
Well, but how are those approvals or permits awarded by the college?
There's a parking committee that's chaired by our dean that takes care of what they call the OSC, Office of Student Engagement. And she has a committee with students. They are first starting, well, two things. They're starting based on need. So if you have a reason to have to go visit a physician or some other medical help, or you have a job student teaching, or some of those you get first preference, and the preference goes up to seniors and works its way down. But predominantly they're done by demonstrating a need for having a vehicle on campus.
I find this point or question I'm asking really, I think in the great scheme of things, is probably immaterial. But the analysis assumed 120 beds, 10%, and therefore 10% of the people who are in these dorms will have permission to have a car, which isn't necessarily so at all. I mean, it could be more or less than that, depending upon the criteria you mentioned. But if not them, then somebody else is going to park. The parking for this is on the yet-to-be-developed Cunningham Field, as I understand.
That's where we would like all student parking to be. Right now, student parking is dispersed around the campus. There are some spaces available at different places. We do not let students park next to their dorms anywhere.
But these people in here who have cars have to park, have to park not here, but someplace else.
Correct. And there are two places. The closest place now will be back over here in the new lot we put behind the houses on Fieldhouse Lane, where they're dedicated student parking spaces now. We would, if we go through the next piece, they will probably move over, but either of those places they would go. So we do not, as I said, we don't guarantee students parking spaces next to the building. If we had a student with a disability who needed to park here for transportation purposes, we have the space here for that.
And the route, if somebody has a car there, ultimately they would be assigned to park at Cunningham Field parking lot. What would be the route of walking that person would take to get to that lot?
Well, I think there are actually two options. One is to go out here and go down underneath the railroad station and up and across the crosswalk that we have agreed we would put in there. And the other is to cross the street, which they can do anywhere on the roundabout, or anywhere on the roundabout as they go down here, and then go stay on that side of Chester Road and through and up through the separate parking lot or around the separate parking lot.
And presumably if these folks want to go into the town, the heart of the town, they go through the roundabout.
Yes.
Or they also can go, stay on this,
I understand. But brings me to a
that
point.
side of the street and go around by the train station.
I remain concerned that there are no flashing signals for warning cars that there are pedestrians walking through the roundabout. I've raised that point here before, and I've been told that the decision was made that further analysis or developments will determine whether such will be installed. I assume at the end of the day that's a decision made by PennDOT.
It is.
I will just tell you, I don't know how the need to have such warnings will be demonstrated unless a pedestrian is actually hit and killed in the roundabout. And so I don't know if somebody can tell me how at some point in the future it will be determined there should have been warning signals of telling approaching cars that there are people in the roundabout. How is anybody going to know that that should have been done or needs to be done until somebody's hurt?
I think the two things is, one is that fortunately, the traffic's relatively slow in the roundabout and coming in, and there are yield signs there, but there are yield.
No, I understand that.
And you're right, there are no flashing light signs. I don't know. It's,
I don't,
what you say
does
is-
anybody
It's a
know?
possibility, it is. I know I cross a lot, and I have not felt at risk yet. I mean, it's a much shorter cross than it was before with the,
Well, and you don't have to cross both lanes
Right.
of traffic.
Right.
I understand all of that, that's
and
remaining.
you have to look one way, I mean, there
Right, true, I
In
understand.
this, David, in this particular case, we don't have it in place yet, but of course, the corner of 320 and Harvard will have a flashing light
Yeah, I understand.
and a
That's-
bump
that
out,
would be helpful.
which
Thanks,
will also,
thanks.
right there.
Thanks,
Exactly,
Dave, for
yes.
here.
You know, it's-
this side.
yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
well, that's good.
And so certainly the people in this complex would have the option of crossing there if they felt.
But that's not the direct option,
slow
to get them
No,
into the
it's
center.
not.
They won't, you know.
Right, they're likely to go, if they want to do this, across the 101 and then across the other way. The Chester
Or-
Road piece, the Chester Road crossing is probably the most challenging. Rutgers is pretty easy, the college space is easy.
Well, these folks could also continue on the west side of the street,
Mhm.
past the
That's what I
front of the inn.
They can either
And
go
over-
over and down the steps and up and cross the flat, the
But if
flashing
they, right, and if they're heading into town, they could go in front of the inn and just
cross the
cross by
bridge.
Hobbs and be in town.
I think as, I remember when Milton Eisenhower was president of Penn State, and they built a bunch of new buildings, they didn't put in any sidewalks, they just waited to see where people walked, and then that's when
And
they
then
put the
they go,
sidewalks.
right.
And I think you won't know how people who live in this storm are gonna walk to where they're gonna go until they're actually there and walking.
Greg and I actually talked about that today. It's not an uncommon college planning practice to see where the cow path winds up and then.
Right, and to be honest, I had a conversation with Susan over the weekend, because, although the intersection of 320 and Harvard is very much not a good place to cross right now, as we put in the bump outs and the flashing lights, it might be quite a good place. And the college, might evaluate a little bit into right now you don't have a path
Right.
leading
From here,
directly
it is
there,
kind of- right.
but you may find that,
We have a way out here.
that
but
there's,
not-
a path through the grass being,
Well, I think we'll know.
at which point you'll have it,
We'll know
I'm
either
sure.
ways, either through the grass or through the snow. One or the other.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Thank you very much, Joe,
so,
appreciate it.
Yeah.
If we get David,
David,
no.
Don't forget, Sally.
David, just apropos your parking question, one thing I would note that the ordinance that we just passed, which doesn't apply to this project, but if there were a future similar project, requires a parking study, and in particular it says, for parking within the institutional districts, the parking study must demonstrate that parking is adequate for the entire parcel, either by compliance with an overall parking plan or by an incremental update to a previously approved plan. So the concern you had about, well, will it really be 10%? That if this project were done in the future, there would have to be an overall parking plan showing that there's adequate parking for all of campus.
And we did show all our parking to the planning committee, and we also did 2 counts on campus to show them where we were with the parking. So I think that was helpful to them.
I'm sure it was. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Other,
Let me take this down.
any other comments, questions? I would just make one comment, which is I think that having approximately 240 students living in that location and presumably crossing into town to shop at the co-op for their groceries, I think is going to be a real positive influence on town as well as on the student population. So I think it's a great design.
Yes. And Stu also made the comment that there'd be a key card system. Having nothing really to do with this land development application, that happens to be the same key card system that hopefully will allow students to use their card at places like the Co-op and other businesses in town. So we really appreciate the fact that the college is working hard on that one. So.
All right, so the motion,
Okay.
any other discussion or comments? The motion is to give preliminary approval to the so-called NPPR Residence Hall project. All in favor, please say aye.
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 It's approved.
Did you get a second on that?
Second.
There, okay.
And
Let's put in David, because so
And
far.
Yeah.
true to form, and no, for the record, I have to recuse myself.
All right, on this one.
Okay, thank you.
I think all of the comments.
Everything.
Both of the votes.
Right.
The two.
And that is all I have, with the exception that I also wanted to thank the really diligent work that Planning Commission has been doing on all of these things too. They've been kept very busy, and they will probably continue to be kept quite busy with things on their agenda. But it's been really a pleasure to work with a very talented and it's a group of people who bring their talents from all sorts of different areas that all really are right on target for the Planning Commission. So that's been great. And then I'll make this much briefer than Ralph's, but as my last meeting here, I just wanted to say that it's really been an honor to be on Borough Council, and it's been, I moved to Swarthmore with my family because of the community that it was. It's a pretty exceptional sense of community in this town, and it's that way because of many things. It's the diversity and interesting people who live in town. It's the fabric, the built fabric of town that makes it. It's our sidewalks. It's the huge amount of volunteering that goes on in this place. And in terms of, I have really felt privileged to be able to chair Planning and Zoning Committee for 8 years and do my best. And I'm sure, I mean, there are just things that other people don't necessarily agree with, but in my mind, I was definitely doing my best to make sure that that sense of community and the character of the town and the physical functioning of the town continues as well as it has been through history. So, thank you. And that's it.
Thank you, Liz. Elizabeth, thank you for shepherding these last 3 items through today, and for 8 years of really hard and diligent and important work on planning and zoning. Thank you very much. Next, public safety.
Committee didn't meet this month, but it looks like, well, I can't say for certain, but I'll forecast there probably will be a meeting in January, I imagine. And I think that, in the coming year, 2016, we'll be dealing with the fire company issues for sure. And it looks like parking may continue to be of interest to different constituencies in the borough, and I'm sure we'll be dealing with that as well. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Public Works, David.
Now, Ralph, if you permit me, I will yield my time as Chair of Public Works and Parks and Recreation and myself as President Pro Tem of Council to make 2 presentations.
Do you want to do your resolution first?
Yeah. I will
Don't
yield.
forget.
I will yield back to myself as Chair of Public Works, Parks and Recreation. internalized, Robert. Like Abby Wambach, you are about to walk to the side of the pitch and take off your cleats for the last time. In the past, you, as president, have presented books to outgoing council members. This evening, as council's president pro tem, I am pleased to do the same. I have a book for each of you. Each is a seminal work in its field. As it happens, the book you are about to receive is much bigger than the book Elizabeth is about to receive, which is only fitting since you are president.
Not because I talked more.
Because of that. However,
You probably read it.
however, the book Elizabeth is about to receive has much greater personal significance for me. So that having been said, for Ralph, yeah, you got it. For Ralph, I have Donald Shoup's bestseller, particularly apropos of tonight's meeting. The High Cost of Free Parking.
Oh my God,
I tell you, that's a barn burner.
I didn't start to read it for fear that I wouldn't be able to give it to you.
David, you very much like you all.
Kind of back.
Easy come, easy go.
The book bears the following inscription. December 21st, 2015, to Ralph Jacobs, with thanks for your years of faithful service to the citizens of Swarthmore Borough. Signed by myself as President Pro Tem and Tim Kearney as Mayor.
Well, thank you all very much. It really has been a privilege and an honor and a personal pleasure working with each of you, and I appreciate this.
And for Elizabeth, the Baltimore School of Urban Ecology, Space, Scale, and Time for the Study of Cities. The editor and lead author of this groundbreaking study is the well-known U.S. Forest Service research scientist, J. Morgan Grove. December 21st, 2015, to Elizabeth Knapp, with thanks for your years of faithful service to the citizens of Swarthmore Borough, signed by myself as President Pro Tem and Tim Kearney as Mayor.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to give each of those books, to each of you. We all, and I'm sure others will say this in their own way, perhaps over cookies, if cookies did in fact arrive.
We did.
As of this morning, I knew there were oranges. I didn't know. We all thank you for your thoughtful guidance you have provided to the council over years. Ralph, for a number of those years, you were head of Public Safety Committee and worked dutifully in that regard, and your service as president over the last 2 years has been an example to all of us as how that office should be filled. And Elizabeth, if you didn't exist, we'd have to clone you. And I'm not sure if we have cloned you, but nevertheless, your work in your field, informed by your expertise as a designer and architect, has been of inestimable value to the borough. The final thought I would make is, I believe it would be most appropriate if one of you would agree to replace recent Council President Susan Smythe as Swarthmore's representative to the Central Delaware County Authority. I feel certain that Susan would be much in your debt if either of you would agree to do that. All that having been said, I yield my time back to myself as Chair of Public Works, Park and Recreation, and I move adoption of the resolution setting 2016 recycling rules and regulations.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Approved.
We will not meet on Christmas Eve Day this year, and the committee will next meet. So there's 3 of them. He's all broken up. He told me at 8:45, 8:15 this morning, as I was sitting in the lobby of Borough Hall, that that the General Government Committee would not meet this morning. So I'm giving you further notice that I've received first.
I got a 15-minute reminder on council.
I have nothing further to report for our committee.
All right, next, other business, and then mayor or coach.
Thank you, Ralph. First thing I wanted to say is that Patrolman Anthony Malloy celebrated his 10th anniversary this year. It's hard to believe that he's been 10 years on the force. He still looks like he's 14. And he also received his master's degree this year as well. So two highlights in his career with us, and he's a wonderful community officer. Love the work that he does. I'd like to actually take David's point and yield some of my time to the chief. We're dealing with police issues.
I appreciate the mayor's indulgence. Just real quick, in addition to the monthly meetings that public safety has, the police department has a management team meeting every month at 7 o'clock in the morning, so you know the people that show up there are very dedicated. Elizabeth Knapp has been a member of public safety for several years, and we sincerely appreciate your contributions to the management of the police department, and we'd like to give you this little memento.
Symbolic of the 7 a.m. beverage.
In your own badge.
And just, Ralph has been a member of this committee, I think, forever. Being on public safety, then being the chair of public safety, and even as he moved on to president of Borough Council, he continued to attend our management team meetings. And I think it's important that you know that these are not informational meetings, these are exchanges of management ideas. I mean, the mayor's the boss, he can tell us what to do, there's no argument there. But the input we've gotten from David Crichton and Ralph and Elizabeth has been invaluable. Ralph, for your time spent, we'd like to present you with a jacket from the police department. Just to make, it's important to note that the officers contributed to this. This did not come out of the police department budget. And in case the officers forget who you are after you leave, we have to meet.
That's great. I'll remember who I am. Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you. And thank you to all the members of the force.
And I just wanted to add my own, this is a mutual admiration society, I suppose, but first Elizabeth, I've only been mayor for 2 years, but I was on the planning commission forever before that sort of thing. So I've seen you operate from both sides of the spectrum in terms of the way the planning work, and it's been said before, but just your attention to detail and your just unrelenting positive nature about the borough and what the borough needs is exemplary. And the amount of time that you spend, but you're not going to spend anymore, as a volunteer. It's a volunteer. You saw a need that you were able to slide into very well to do such a wonderful job over the last 10 years. So you have my personal thanks for your time.
Thanks.
And then Ralph, we've known each other for a long time, since you 9, with girls who are now 25-year-olds. So it's, as David said, watching you operate as the president of the council has been really wonderful. You're even-handed, just able to handle sort of any kind of situation that came up very nicely, and always did it with again, this kind of, similar to Elizabeth, this attention to detail from your particular point of view about wording of things and about what the implications were for things that I would just don't see. And it's been great to watch and a learning experience for me as well. So again, you have my personal thanks for all your hard work and again, your volunteers, because I'll say it again, the borough really functions because talented people come out of their houses and do the work that needs to be done. And that's true whether it's borough council with you guys, or whether it's with the fire department, or whether it's with any of the other myriad opportunities for people to be volunteers and to really contribute to the well-being of the borough.
Well, I appreciate that.
I have two items. One is just a reminder that the reorganization meeting is on the first Monday in January, which I believe is the 4th. The mayor will preside over that meeting, and
Absolute power
he will
corrupts.
swear in the new council members and the returning council member, and elect a president of council. I would ask, if possible, that people think about committees. We do have some things already that need to be done in January, and it would be helpful if the committees were up and running. So it's not a requirement, it's actually not a requirement to have committees at all under our council structure in Pennsylvania, but it would be helpful if we could get through some of that as well at the meeting on the 4th. And I was just going to add a couple of words. When you guys started, we still printed the borough codes. That's how many things have changed. Now everything is online. And I used to get calls about every 6 months from a woman named Ruth Fazio, who was an employee of Justinian Publishing that became Legal. They were bought out. And she kept saying, you need to do a printed version. You need to update your ordinances. They're out of date. And I'd say, I can't because we're doing another revision to a zoning ordinance. Or, no, we're redoing our parking regulations because you guys were adamant that you were going to get through time and time again with things that were going to change. So in the end, we probably saved thousands of dollars because we don't publish anymore. I just now send them the electronic version. It's on the website the next day. And all of your magnificent work is on there. But she finally got tired of calling me. I said, we're not done. We're doing yet another ordinance. So it's been a pleasure working with both of you. And you really have left quite a legacy. Amlegal.com. You can see it.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Well,
I like to bring changes in the law to your attention when they happen, and the municipality's planning code was recently amended to allow for the appointment of alternates to the planning commission. Right now, you're entitled to appoint alternates to the zoning hearing board, but not to the planning commission. So if there's ever people standing in line, there's not enough seats, and people can feel. Yeah, it happens occasionally. But I just thought that council people should be aware of that opportunity.
So is it one alternate? or
2, I believe.
two?
Yeah.
Interesting,
So,
okay.
and I've enjoyed working with you both. And thank you for the opportunity.
thank you. All right. David.
I move we adjourn.
It's been a pleasure.
January 4th. January 4th.